Welcome to today's brand origin deep dive. Sometimes the most fascinating brand stories aren't about success, but the ambitious, silent journeys of projects you might never have known existed. If you find value in this kind of storytelling, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps more than you know. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, or your thoughts on brands that aim high. Let's dive in and discover how it all began. You walk into the cavernous space. The air is still, cold, carrying the faint metallic tang of disuse. This isn't a museum, not officially. It's one of the forgotten hangars, once buzzing with quiet purpose, now just echoing the footsteps you take across the polished concrete floor. Overhead, weak light filters through dusty skylights, illuminating the ghostly outlines of specialized equipment, shrouded in drop cloths like sleeping giants. This is where the dream lived, high above the world, carried on fragile skin. This is a graveyard of ambition, specifically the final resting place of Google's Project Loon. Project Loon was a network that was supposed to float on the edge of space, connecting the unconnected. Imagine it. Internet access delivered from giant, stark white balloons, sailing silently through the stratosphere. The initial, idealistic vision was breathtaking in its simplicity and global reach, captured in early internal memos hinting at a world brought together by aerial connectivity. But like many grand visions, its story is tangled with unforeseen forces, quiet failures, and a lingering sense of mystery. The symbolic thread of that high-altitude balloon itself, its stark white form against the blue, the implicit fragility of its existence so far from solid ground, already suggests the precarious nature of this endeavor. You feel the sensory detail of the vast, silent hangar, the cool air, the dust motes dancing in light shafts, the faint echo pressing down. The emotional shift is one of curiosity mixed with a growing sense of unease, the weight of failed potential palpable. Subtle hints of unforeseen technical hurdles and complex regulatory shadows already seem to linger in the quiet corners, foreshadowing the challenges that would later confront this utopian goal. Building on what came before, you move past the quiet corners of the hangar and into the buzzing heart of the project's early operations, the makeshift control rooms and nascent data centers. This is where the vision met its first major wall of technical complexity. You can almost hear it now, the low, constant hum of early servers processing vast streams of weather data, the crisp click of instruments recording atmospheric conditions, the sometimes frustrating feel of prototype materials that didn't quite behave as expected. The initial engineering optimism, powered by theory and diagrams, starts to collide with the unpredictable realities of the upper atmosphere. One peculiar anomaly quickly emerged, an unexpected drift pattern in the initial atmospheric data collection. Balloons, intended to follow predicted currents, would veer off course with alarming consistency, their tracking signals sometimes marred by a persistent, low-level frequency interference that engineers initially dismissed as simple static. This wasn't just a minor glitch. It became a major historical turning point, costing precious time and resources as teams wrestled with the phantom noise and unpredictable paths. Brand historians still debate whether focusing solely on hardware fixes rather than external factors at this stage was the critical misstep. Inside the logs from this period, cryptic notes appear, mentions of unaccounted-for variables and external atmospheric influences, subtle hints that the challenges were far from purely mechanical or data processing issues, foreshadowing forces beyond their initial understanding. The balloon, meant to be a simple conduit, was revealing the overwhelming, fragmented complexity of the environment itself. Building on the foundational work and quiet development we explored, the project takes its first bold step into the public eye. You witness the careful preparation, the tense countdown, and then the liftoff. This initial, widely publicized ascent becomes a major milestone, splashed across headlines like a tech demo finally going big. The balloon rises with surprising visual silence, a stark white dot against the blue, eventually disappearing. Later, you hear the distant, almost imperceptible hum of a ground station monitoring its progress, a sound that contrasts sharply with the public fanfare. Press conferences and leader statements paint a picture of near-total success. A specific, widely quoted line from a CEO, perhaps describing early results as changing the game overnight, captures global attention. Internally, though, documentation reveals persistent navigation glitches and unexpected power drain issues are creating headaches. This public optimism feels less like a confident stride and more like the slightly overhyped energy of a Kickstarter campaign before the product actually ships. This divergence between hopeful media narrative and the quiet desperation within the team, struggling with persistent technical issues, defines this phase. The high-altitude imagery returned by the balloons is beautiful but slightly disorienting. Vast, empty landscapes, strange atmospheric phenomena, hinting at how alone these devices are up there, and how limited control truly is over their unseen drift. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind the project's ambitious public targets announced so early, wondering if it created unnecessary pressure. Internal memos from this period contain vague references, mentions of unexpected external resistance or non-technical challenges beginning to surface, adding layers of complexity beyond just fixing the tech. After tackling the engineering puzzles and operational complexities that came with scaling global balloon networks, a new kind of challenge emerged, one from the ground up. You find yourself navigating sterile digital meeting rooms, the air thick with unspoken tension. Your eyes scan endless scrolls of dense, dry legal texts, filled with jargon about spectrum rights and flight paths. The static hum of recorded conference calls plays in the background, voices often hushed. Discussing compliance and permits. The truth was, keeping a balloon airborne isn't just about physics. It's about navigating the intricate web of global regulations and politics. A critical regulatory hurdle tied to frequency allocation in a strategically sensitive region became a constant, looming threat. It wasn't a technical problem, it was deeply political, involving overlapping claims and national security concerns that technology couldn't simply bypass. This proved to be a major turning point, shifting focus from engineering to diplomacy and legal battles. The initial optimism begins to erode, replaced by a growing sense of paranoia. You feel the defensiveness build as external forces push back, sometimes unexpectedly. The balloon's view, once a symbol of freedom and connection, now starkly reveals lines and borders. Invisible geopolitical boundaries, restricted airspaces marked in digital red, areas deliberately excluded from coverage for reasons entirely outside of signal strength. In one archived memo, a team member recounts the bizarre experience of needing a separate permit for each balloon traversing a particular country's airspace above a certain altitude, requiring manual weekly updates, a process so complex it felt like trying to herd digital cats across a minefield. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind the project's inability to navigate these seemingly insurmountable regulatory mazes, especially given parent company resources and lobbying power. This entanglement in earthbound power structures intensifies, casting a long shadow. The writing is on the wall. The project's ultimate fate now seems tied less to technical prowess and more to a potential politically induced operational failure, or worse, enforced abandonment. Building on what came before, you've seen the challenges, the incredible engineering feats, and the glimmer of hope Project Loon offered. But every moonshot faces gravity, and for Loon, that final pull came from within, not just the stratosphere. The narrative reaches its climax, not with a bang, but a calculated, difficult decision. You find yourself in a virtual meeting room, the faces on screen grim. This is the turning point, the moment it becomes clear that despite the technical success in providing connectivity from the edge of space, the business model, the path to sustainable global coverage, simply isn't viable within the current corporate structure or market realities. There's a lesser-known detail often buried in the official announcements, a leaked fragment of a post-mortem report, specifically detailing the cost per user in non-dense, hard-to-reach rural areas where Loon was needed most. It wasn't just high, it was astronomically out of reach for the very people it aimed to serve. This analysis, perhaps more than any single balloon failure, sealed its fate. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind investing so heavily before proving that final mile of commercial viability. The sensory details haunt you. The sudden silence in the mission control room after the final data link from a distant balloon goes dark, replaced only by the hum of idle servers. You imagine holding a recovered, slightly warped piece of equipment, tangible evidence of a dream grounded. The emotional shift is palpable. Defeat washes over the team. Resignation settles in, and for some, perhaps a sense of betrayal that years of relentless innovation couldn't overcome spreadsheet realities. The symbolic thread culminates in the image of a final, broken transmission, a flicker of light fading on a screen, or a last balloon, perhaps intentionally, allowed to drift silently off course, lost to the vastness, representing the quiet death of the dream. Yet, seeing that image reminds me that tears fallen down, more than a tear, can be dangerous, symbolizing that what symbol is it is a direct result of Kaylee's Baidu with half-mature bickering. Why would companies allow shares of tiles then? It's so, perhaps intentionally, this independence explanation could point out, rather than perhaps being professional, based. You stand back in the silent hangar, the story told, but the feeling of unease remains. Project Loon is gone, officially folded back into the vast corporate structure it sprang from. The sterile corporate announcement is a stark contrast to the quiet sadness you sense lingering in the air, the unspoken grief of those who poured years into lifting dreams into the sky. The balloons that were meant to connect the world now exist only in archives, in photographs, and the quiet whispers of the engineers and dreamers who built them. You see dust settling on forgotten equipment, the cold reality of physical objects left behind in a space meant for soaring ambition. Was it a noble failure, a victim of impossible technical odds and earthbound politics? Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind the final decision, searching for the singular cause in a web of technical hurdles and regulatory friction. But perhaps there was more to it. Data gathered from the edge of space that changed the calculus entirely, lessons learned about connectivity, or perhaps something unexpected seen during those silent drifts high above. The promise of connection lingers, an invisible phantom network in the sky, a quiet hum beneath the noise of the world. The enduring image of the white balloon becomes a symbol of fragile ambition, lost potential, and the secrets held by the high atmosphere. It's a reminder that even the highest aspirations can be brought low by unseen forces, leaving a sense of haunting resonance and unanswered what-ifs. You look up at the dusty skylight, imagining the silent drift that once was, wondering what secrets the wind still carries, what signals might still be echoing in the vast, empty space where the balloons once flew, waiting to be heard again. What happens to a dream when it falls back to Earth? After completing the main content in Section 6, add a 300-word closing segment, Project Loon's journey, like the path of its balloons, ultimately led back to Earth, but not without leaving a profound echo. The key takeaway is perhaps that innovation at the edge of possibility is inherently risky, a blend of technical challenge and human aspiration. The long-term brand legacy isn't found in a deployed network, but in the pioneering spirit it embodied and the valuable lessons learned about stratospheric communication and global connectivity. It demonstrated what was technically feasible, even if not economically or politically viable in the long run. The cultural symbolism of Project Loon lies in that simple white balloon, a potent image of hope reaching for the sky, a symbol of ambitious solutions to global problems, but also a reminder of the complex forces that ground even the most elevated ideas. The lessons learned extend beyond technology, touching on the intricate dance between bold vision, practical execution, corporate strategy, and the unpredictable realities of our world. Even in its quiet dissolution, Project Loon left an indelible mark on the pursuit of global internet access and high-altitude technology. It reminds us that failure is often just a waypoint on the path to future breakthroughs, accumulating knowledge that powers the next attempt, perhaps under a different name, with different technology. And maybe, just maybe, the soul of a brand is never just in its product, but in the people, stories, and stumbles that shape it, leaving an echo that inspires long after the physical form is gone.